What up, y'all? I'm Dr. CBS here with Doc Jab, and you're tuned into episode 15, the birthday episode of The Last Dope Intellectual. All right, Jared. I am so excited because it is my birthday week, and I am one of those obnoxious people who celebrates for multiple days. I take my birthday very seriously. I will stop talking to folks if they miss my birthday. Like it's if they were invited to festivities and then just don't show up because when they said they would, I'd be mad because listen, I feel like I'm very giving. I don't ask for much. I try to orient my life toward the people. So for this one day a year, I just want to be about Dr. CBS, you know? So May 16th is my birthday. I'm so excited. And so what I want to shoot the shit about is some other notable May tourist birthdays, because we got a lot. We are deep this month. Let me tell you something, okay? We got Karl Marx. We got John Brown. Okay, I didn't mean to start with two whites, but whatever. We got Sylvia Wynter. We got Malcolm X. We got Yuri Kochiyama. We got Lorraine Hansberry. Now, I think we got Ho Chi Minh, though I heard that his birthday is not actually May 19th because when he was born, people didn't actually know exactly when they were born in Vietnam, but that it was the day of the founding of the party or something. But he said May 15th, or excuse me, he said May 19th. We going with May 19th, okay?
There it is.
And then I also want to give a special shout out to Mac, to Salifu. It's his birthday on May 12th when we're recording. So happy birthday to Salifu. Now, I also want to give a shout out to the runners up. These are the April Tauruses. Now, ain't nothing like a May Taurus, but the April Tauruses are cool too. And for the April Tauruses, we got Lenin, okay? We got Mumia, free Mumia Abu Jamal, all political prisoners. We got Hubert Harrison. We got my love, Doxy Wilkerson. We got Angelo Herndon. And we got Toussaint Louverture, okay? And then the last runner-up I'll give is a May Gemini. And that is James Boggs. So we deep in Taurus season, we deep in May, and it's just so crazy how many radicals and revolutionaries were born. And so I feel honored and blessed to be among that company. So
in the right place. And when you put that list together for the run sheet, I looked at it and was blown away. I was like, this is a little bit overwhelming. It's a lot of heavy hitters, even with the whites that you started with. That right, even with the whites. I mean, if that's a heavy list right there. So congratulations. You were in good company and maintaining the tradition for sure.
Yeah. Word to my parents for timing that, doing whatever they do.
Well done.
And, today I'm repping Maurice Bishop. He's not a May Taurus revolutionary, but he might as well be because he's my man. And you got who on your shirt?
I got Free Ant again. Well, for here, this is the first Free Ant that I picked up, and I learned a little more about his situation. His trial's been pushed back till September, apparently. And it's just another one of those cases where we've talked about before on your show and elsewhere on the channel that these political prisoners keep getting made. And this brother, and when I looked into his story some more, the Philly police and DEA and anti-terrorist task force ran all up in his house at gunpoint, put his family out on the street, all over his activism. I mean, certainly no. Anyway, so Free Ant. I mean, he's still on one of those bracelets or whatever. But I mean, what he had to go through is anyway. So anyway, Free Ant. Shout out certainly to Maurice and all the other all those badass Tauruses.
Period. And we're gonna actually talk to another badass Taurus about the making of political prisoners given his situation. So I can't wait till we get to that till later in the show. But Conversely,
Exactly.
May is not just about dope ass Tauruses. Also, some really despicable, imperialist, backward, settler colonial bullshit has also happened. And so the first thing that I want to mention is that this is the anniversary of the MOVE bombing, which was May 13th, 1985. And I know that there's a lot going on in Philly this week, commemorating not that event, because fuck that event, but the MOVE family and, and all that they have been able to do for the Black community, their rootedness in Philadelphia, and condemning that horrible and horrifying bombing, which was actually the culmination of almost a decade of terrorism against the MOVE family. And in the Black Agenda Review, our post is actually Mumia Abu Jamal's analysis of that event called the Mother's Day Massacre, where he talks about the event. Mind you, Mumia's already behind bars, not least because of his advocacy for the MOVE family, right? Part of the reason why he was targeted by the state. And so, the city of Philadelphia, under a Black mayor, bombed out the MOVE compound on Osage Avenue. And the fire actually killed 11 people. I want to say 5 children. And one of the 2 remaining victims, Ramona Africa, was subsequently arrested, indicted, and incarcerated for 7 years, I believe. And it's a horrible, horrible event of domestic terrorism in U.S. history. I think it was the first bomb dropped in U.S. history on, within the nation. And so it's just a horrible event that I think we very much need to acknowledge and not let those horrifying deeds pass unnoticed.
Absolutely, and I'm very glad you invited us to remember that and commemorate, as you say, not the bombing, but the people who suffered and ultimately survived, and those, of course, who lost their lives that day, and who were still being dragged around in state institutions, even in death, and being used by for anthropological purposes, the bones of these victims. I mean, this is anyway. It's an atrocious event that should never be forgotten. And I do want to quickly shout out Dr. Todd Stephen Burrows again, because he and I and our good brother Dr. Haidt a couple years ago, we went up there, and this is on our mixwhatilike.org, the video. We went up there to Osage Avenue, where I had never been before, to see. And when you see the street on which this bombing took place, first of all, I was reminded, I didn't know how small. I mean, it seems so much bigger on all the video, and all the street is so small and compact, and the community is so compressed. The idea that something threatening could have been coming out of there, which in fact, on some levels politically was amazing, given the conditions these people are supposed to be, are forced to live in. And then you're going to come in and, as you point out, drop bombs on these folks, and then claim that their neighbors wanted this stuff to happen. And by the way, we met neighbors still there who were saying that they never supported the state in doing that, despite some of the claims about what was supposed to be the relationship between MOVE and their neighbor. Anyway, so I mean,
and many of their houses got burned down too. I want to say there were like 61 surrounding homes that were burned down, and all those people were displaced.
And you see why, because there's no way you could hurt one home in that street and not hurt everybody else. So absolutely, I mean, it is anyway. It's unfortunately, I want to say crazy, but again, it's perfectly consistent and logical, based on how the society is set up and continues to run. So.
And then just, the second horrible event, of course, is the Nakba in Palestine, which is the displacement and dispossession of thousands of Palestinians from their home, the effects of which we are still seeing today, the continuation of which we're still seeing today as well in East Jerusalem. The ongoing Israeli state terrorism against Palestinian people, as they're doing things like commemorating Ramadan, existing, right, struggling, resisting for the land that is rightfully theirs. And so these are some of the horrible things that have also happened in May that that the revolutionaries who were born were struggling against. These are the types of things that they were challenging, that they were struggling against, and that they were trying to eradicate in the world that they envisioned. So it's our responsibility, not just the revolutionary Tauruses, but it's our responsibility to continue in their image.
Well, I mean, we have to. I think anyone who claims to be concerned about humanity can't look at what's happening in Palestine and not conclude that Zionism is colonialism, Zionism is racism, and what those people are suffering, no human being should have to suffer. And whatever is supposed to be their failings as a community can be dealt with after the occupation is over with, and people can get back to their human selves. But what's happening there right now is, I mean, it's what happened on Osage Avenue in Philly in 1985. It's writ large and extended over a greater, just a larger size, but it's the same exact process, and people are treated almost in the exact same way. They're penned in, can't move, they're isolated, and at the whim of an unjust settler colony. So, I mean,
yeah, there's anyway. And for people who are saying, like, just imagine somebody just walking into your home and saying, "This is mine now." It's really that simple, right? And every time I see when I see that, I'm just kind of like, huh? How can this be considered anything other than expropriation, dispossession, and straight up colonial violence? And so, from the river to sit there
and see Israeli settlers calling it movie night, and they sit on in their lawn chairs and watch people in Gaza get bombed, like as a Friday night, like that's date night. Like that's literally happening right now. I mean, it's crazy. So anyway, thanks for raising that up.
Yeah. So, to end the shoot the shit on a positive note, like, this is why we join organizations. This is why we organize. This is why we engage in political education. This is why we're internationalists. This is why we uphold solidarity, because situations like this will persist if we don't. All right, y'all, continuing on with the birthday episode. I have such an amazing and awesome guest, Derica Purnell. I am so excited to be in conversation with her. So Derica Purnell is a lawyer, writer, organizer, and author of the forthcoming book, Becoming Abolitionist, Police Protests and the Pursuit of Freedom. She works to end police and prison violence by providing legal assistance, research, and trainings in community-based organizations through an abolitionist framework. As a Skadden Fellow, she helped to build the Justice Project at Advancement Project's national office, which focused on consent decrees, police and prosecutor accountability, and jail closures, providing community training, political education, and legal representation to organizers. Her advocacy efforts led to the dismissal of over 3,000 cases based on unconstitutional policing practices. Additionally, she supports several campaigns and grassroots organizations around the criminal legal system, electoral justice, and community investment, including Action St. Louis, Dream Defenders, Communities Against Police Crimes and Repression, the Ferguson Collaborative, and the Movement for Black Lives. Derica also organized the founding steering committee for Law for Black Lives, a growing network of 5,000 law students, lawyers, and legal workers to support social movements. In the wake of the coronavirus pandemic, Derica co-created the COVID-19 Policing Project at the Community Resource Hub for Safety Accountability. The project tracks police arrests, harassment, citations, and other enforcement through public health orders related to the pandemic. Derica received her JD from Harvard Law School, her BA from the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and studied public policy and economics at the University of California, Berkeley, go Bears, as a public policy and international affairs law fellow. Her writings have been published in the New York Times, The Atlantic, The Guardian, Cosmopolitan, Harper's Bazaar, Teen Vogue, The Appeal, Truth Out, Slate, Boston Review, Huffington Post, Vox, and In These Times. She's been on NPR, Democracy Now!, Slate's What's Next, and MSNBC, and is the former editor-in-chief of the Harvard Journal of Africana Public Policy. Derica has lectured, studied, and strategized around social movements across the United States, the Netherlands, Belgium, South Africa, the United Kingdom, and Australia. She is from St. Louis and lives in DC. So welcome, Derica.
Hi, thank you so much. It's so weird hearing your whole bio. You're just like, oh my gosh, when is this going to stop?
Listen, I feel the exact same way. And I'm always just like, it's such a weird performative thing, but On the other hand, I think it's important for folks to know all that you do, because it's a lot. Like, we all know you be dropping gems on Twitter, but you're so much more than that. So
thank you. I appreciate it.
Of course. Okay. So I want to start with one of my favorite pieces that you've written that you dropped back in March. So you published an article in The Guardian titled "The George Floyd Act Wouldn't Have Saved George Floyd's Life. That Says It All," in which you laid out how the bill's paltry reforms are not only woefully inadequate to curb police brutality, but also exacerbate the problem by giving police more money. Can you say more about your critique of the bill, where it's at now, and what Congress ought to be doing?
Yes, absolutely. So what happens after in the wake of viral police killings is that Congress or your local mayors or even police, even cops would get on camera and say, hey, look, this is horrible. We're going to fix it. We're going to get this right. And what happens is that these set of reforms then go on tour. So we'll start hearing, okay, we need more body cameras, or we need more diversity, or we need more contact with the communities in terms of community policing programs. And so if we have all our police athletic leagues, then just maybe if we practice playing basketball with these kids, we'll know how to treat them when we encounter them on the street. And so what happens with these sort of reforms is that people are so eager to do something to stop resistance, to stop rebellion, to get people to say, okay, at least we're going to start somewhere. And so a lot of the reforms of the bill are recycled reforms that have been used over and over and over again over time to tell people that we're going to fix policing. We're going to make it the kind of policing that everyone can enjoy. But it just kind of depends on how you define police. If you think police are just this neutral institution that shows up and stops crimes and keep people safe, then you're probably going to be excited about making sure that everyone can have access to that. But if you understand police as a coercive apparatus that keeps people in line, that maintains capitalism and the social hierarchy, then you can't enjoy that by nature of the institution. And so what this bill does is says, look, we're going to limit a few more techniques that police can use to kill someone. But police, they can just switch up the method, right? So you're literally they're going to keep moving the line. So you can ban the chokehold, but I can still hit you with my car. I can not hit you with my car anymore, but I can still tase you to death. I cannot tase you to death, but I can still sexually assault you. So there's so many different tactics that police can use to issue violence because the Supreme Court gives them wide license to do that. And so what this George Floyd Justice and Policing Act does is not get to the root of the problem, which is social inequality, capitalism, racism, heteropatriarchy, white supremacy. But instead it says, look, we're going to tweak the system and give them more resources to do that. And so what's unfortunate is that police come into contact because they have resources, because they have jobs, because they have staff in order to support our communities. And when Joe Biden pledges to give more money to the police, when bills like this suggest, we need more investigations to see why police do this in the first place, we know why. Exactly. We know why. We don't need the body cameras. We see the body. And so what happens is that these resources give local police departments more opportunities to come into contact with us, thereby increasing our risk of becoming, hurt, assaulted, arrested, detained, imprisoned, and in many cases, killed. And so it's those acts that rouse people up because they're so polarizing. It becomes a Democratic Republican thing where you lose sight that, well, this bill actually obscures the violence. Both sides are wrong. Yes. And that's the problem with this bill.
Yeah, fuckery on both sides.
Yes, exactly.
Fuckery on both sides.
Yes, that is exactly what this is.
So something you said was really intriguing. Do you think that this country is more concerned with stopping rebellion and uprisings and actual progressive change than they are with stopping police brutality and police violence?
Oh, absolutely. What's so sad is I don't think it's something that's necessarily intentional. It doesn't have to be, right? So let me give an example. Police, sort of like with prisons, the violence that comes with the institution is the cost of doing business. And I think for lots of people to continue to use police and prisons in order to address social harm, it's just the cost of doing the job. And so you don't need someone who to be necessarily like racist, vicious in order to accomplish that. And so when, for example, the Violence Against Women Act was this act that people said we're going to use to protect women who are at risk of their abusers, who are in domestic violence situations. We're going to use this to send a message that if you mess with women, you're going to go to jail. And they give all this money to cops to enforce it. When you look at the rates of domestic violence among police officers, well, you'll say, well, if we wanted to protect violence against women, we wouldn't continue to fund the profession that is especially violent against women in their personal lives and as cops. And so the cost of doing business to keep capitalists safe is, well, some people are going to have to be arrested. Some people may have to die. It's that sort of calculation. And so I think that the government is absolutely more interested in stopping rebellion than they are in changing police, because rebellion will fundamentally undermine the social order, whereas some of these tweaks and reforms would not.
Yeah. So in keeping with this theme, as we know, despite the guilty verdicts in the Derek Chauvin show trial, basically, right? Dozens of Black, oppressed, and poor people continue to be murdered, even as the trial was going on and even as the jury was deliberating by the police. So why do you think that the verdict gave liberals and many white folks a sigh of relief? And what does that say about the country's fundamental misunderstanding of policing itself?
Well, I think one thing it does is just shows a lack of historical timeline of how these police killings and convictions don't keep more people safe. So, for example, I remember when the video for Walter Scott came out, a bystander recorded, not Ray Tinsing. Ray Tinsing is Sam DuBose. Who is Walter Scott? Michael Schlager. So Michael Schlager, shoots Walter Scott in the back several times for running. He runs away. And then he throws a taser next to him and lies on his police report and says, he tries to get my taser. I had to shoot him because he would have caused serious injury or bodily harm to me or someone else. A Black man in his parking lot just happens to record this encounter. And it goes viral. And unfortunately, of all the police cases, it was the one that was just like, this is so clearly wrong that he's literally running away. He's literally being, shot in the back. And what happens, Ray, I keep saying Ray Tinsing, but Michael Schlager gets arrested. He gets indicted. And he gets convicted. He gets convicted, right? And so he's going to be in prison for maybe 20, 25 years. Walter Scott's family suspected that he ran away because he had outstanding child support debt, and he didn't want to go back to jail again because of this debt that was burdening him. And so he runs away to save his life and to avoid going to jail. Michael Schlager, the cop who commits the killing, the police department refuses to discontinue his benefits because his wife is pregnant. So he's sitting in jail getting benefits from the state, the city, from our taxpayers to take care of his child, while Walter Scott is running from the state because he doesn't want to be locked up, presumably over this debt. And so when Michael Schlager gets convicted, everyone's like, woo, yes, this is going to send a message.
Justice.
Here we go. We got this, right? And that's 2016. I think it's 2016. And, I don't know, 4,000 more people have been killed since then. And so these glimmers of hope are now just being used as sighs of relief because it feels like something when a lot of the options feel like nothing. And now you have politicians who are co-opting movement language, and they're saying, this isn't justice, but this is accountability, and this is how we move forward. And it's like, no, there's no accounting for what happened. This man is about to appeal this tooth and nail. He is going to resist all of this. He's not trying to go to jail. How is this accountability? And so we have to be careful in affirming the outcomes of convictions, because what people are actually celebrating is that Derek Chauvin is going to go to where a lot of poor Black people, a lot of disabled people get sent, and that we feel good about that being a place of punishment, because that's what we do to our people. So it's unfortunate. It just shows how much we got to continue working and say, well, this is a deviation of the system. And as the prosecutor says, I will never forget, God willing, he said, this is not an anti-police prosecution. This is a pro-police prosecution. So if you feel relieved from that stance of the prosecutor that what happened was pro-police, you're legitimizing police violence and the institution as something that we need in order to be safe. And so the whole outcome is just, it's not good.
Yeah, and part of what like I've been thinking about, like the whole sigh of relief thing, is that now it's like, all right, y'all can get out the streets now. Y'all can stop burning our shit down now. Y'all can stop disturbing the peace now, because this is justice. What more do you want? And so it's also a way to weaponize liberalism against radicalism, because it's like, why y'all still mad? He was convicted, right?
Exactly. It's like, oh, don't say defund. You can get justice now. Why do we have to take away money from the police? You have justice now. And what's remarkable, I finished reading Elizabeth Hinton's book, America on Fire, which is just excellent. It's just, of all the policing books I've read, it's the one that gives the longest account of all of these mundane and spectacular acts of resistance from Black communities, Latino communities all across the country. And what's one major takeaway from that book is that since the 1960s, protesters have gotten so much more safe. Like, there were legit shootouts in the projects between cops and Black people, right? And I'm not talking about like Black Panther, Black Liberation Army. I'm talking about regular Black people, you know, with antagonism towards the cops who arrest and harass them every day. So she has all of these examples of kids de-arresting, pulling their friends out of cars, throwing rocks at police cars. And since 1960, the protests have gotten remarkably safer. I mean, there's less resistance coming from protesters. But when you listen to people like Joe Biden on television who said there's no excuse for violence, he doesn't even know probably how bugged people used to get in the past. And so what has remained consistent and gotten worse is the response from the police. So we're getting safer. Our demands are not getting met. Police are getting more violent, and the same amount of people are dying. And we're told to be peaceful. It's like, you have no idea how peaceful we are right now. So yeah, it's exactly, it's a side radical demands.
Yeah, it's interesting. I read, you know, as an aside about that book, I read it as well. It's interesting that capitalism appears in the book 3 times.
Yeah.
Once in the title of a book, once in a quote from somebody else, and one other time. And imperialism, just at, you know, anyway, so. But I think that, to your point, it does highlight a lot of resistance, and also the sort of foundations of the militarization of the police in like the 1968 Safe Streets Act. And so I think it gives a good genealogy of 1033, which is something we're looking at. But there's some stuff in that book.
We need more capitalism. We need more 9/11. We need more surveillance state. All of that. What I think Elizabeth was trying to do is show this record and history of Black rebellion, like specifically. And so I assume that she wrote it like within that container, and that isn't obviously divorced from capitalism. But sometimes when I hear descriptions of concentrated, you know, poverty, it's a proxy for that thing. But it is important that we name capitalism, colonialism, Islamophobia, because our definition. I told her this the other day. I said I agree with your definition of police in the beginning of the book, but I think that we need a little bit more from you in terms of hyper-policing, over-policing. If we understand that regular policing is the punitive and the social control of Black people of different genders, of identities, you know, to help others accumulate wealth, then what is over-policing then? Like, there is no such thing. This is the nature of the job, you know. So we had a really good discussion about that, but in terms of the history, it was refreshing to read a lot of those stories.
You know, and as a political theorist, I would have liked the definition of violence, of rebellion, as opposed to insurrection or uprising, which are used interchangeably. Anyway, I reviewed the book. So anyway, this is neither here nor there, but it is a good book. And I think it does reveal much of what, it gives a good historical overview and reveals much of what you're talking about. So a little bit ago, you mentioned defunding the police. So I just wonder, can you speak about the differences between, and maybe the overlaps of defunding the police, abolishing the police, and community control of the police? Because there seems to be, sometimes they're used interchangeably. Sometimes one is put as the answer over the other. So yeah.
Yeah. Where to even start with this? So some years ago, there were these debates in the movement for Black Lives space about whether we should be fighting for abolition or whether we should be fighting for community control of police. And among these debates, different ideas emerged in different organizations about how do we stop police violence, and how do we figure out how to undermine police protection of themselves as an institution in our communities. And so even though there have been a much longer debate around community control of police and what people are trying to accomplish, I think in the first instance, what people are trying to say is that it's a demand for democratic access over budgeting and over local governments. That if Black people were empowered and our communities were empowered to have community control over police, then they will be accountable to the people that who they're supposed to serve and protect. And again, I think for a lot of people, it's a way to get immediate relief from sort of the policing violence that we have now. I think community control of police is a little bit complicated for me politically, especially since there is a lot of community control of police in most of America. And I'm not convinced that empowering local communities just to maintain possession of many local authoritative body like cops would then alleviate the violence. I guess I'm not convinced that it's going to take a lot of political education, a lot of commitments for people to understand the relationship between police, than to say we need to make something that we can, be in control of. And so I fall more on the abolition side of that debate than like us being in control. I don't think that you can, especially be in control of police as long as capitalism stands. And so sometimes, it's just, there's like different traditions of people who think like, well, this is sort of what we need to do on the step towards liberation. Defund of the police, I've noticed, have lots of different like homes. So there's some people who like want to fund the police because they're libertarian and they don't think that anything should be funded, right? They're just like, there's this.
We just out here.
We just out here. We don't need anything. There's some people who are like, we should defund the police because we shouldn't have any form of government. All forms of government are oppressive. And so I agree with removing resources from, the police because they're a dominating force in institutions. There's some people who are trying to toe the line between defund the police as a way to start just pouring investments into communities. And so typically what I'll hear with those people, they're not quite abolitionists, but they're saying like, our budgets are too big. They're bloated. 30% of some of these municipalities' money goes to police departments. So how do we remove money from police departments and invest it in social services, counselors, which I think is important, but it doesn't undermine capitalism. It's a reallocation argument, which is important because we do need to reallocate funds from oppressive institutions. But if you don't get to the heart of, a lot of the social causes of violence, you're going to basically put yourself in a position where if violence increases for any particular reason, then police are just going to get right back funded. So actually, they need to also figure out how to be in community control of budgets, not necessarily police. And then I would say that there's like defund as a means to abolition. So how do we freeze budgets? How do we do hiring freezes? How do we start offboarding cops from their positions and shrinking our police departments? Or we're also reducing our reliance on police as ways to keep people safe. So sometimes that's literally building individual plans and assessing your relationships to people in your communities in cases of emergencies. Sometimes it's community street interruption programs temporarily until we can figure out how to defeat the NRA, change the interpretation of the Second Amendment, put pressure to stop the production of guns, not just against this possession, right? So there's like these long-term steps that defund can use to say we need to stop allocating resources. One thing I did learn from Elizabeth's book is that the federal government, at least she argues, really set the tone for a lot of the budget conversations for police. And they didn't start funding police until 1964. And then we see billions and billions and billions of dollars in military equipment going to local police departments. And so that's an immediate area where we can say stop. We see these Republican governors turning away unemployment benefits and healthcare. It's like, keep that same energy. Like, say no to this police money, right? So abolition is working towards making police obsolete, but is more importantly working to make this a society that could rely on police obsolete, which means eradicating ableism, eradicating racism, eradicating white supremacy, eradicating all of these institutions of oppression that police are then just set to manage.
Yeah, that's a good point. The other thing that wasn't necessarily in that book that relates to the point you just made is like the proliferation of red squads, right? And as surveillance arms and infiltration arms. And that's linked to another omission in the book, which is anti-communism. Won't go into it. That's okay. But yeah, so maybe we need to do a reading group around that book because it was an interesting one. But I think that I was just going to say that was such a very clarifying distinctions and also interrelationships between these different approaches. So that was illuminating for me because I'm often like, how do these things link?
Yeah.
What's the difference? You know, so thank you for that.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so you're a lawyer, right? What do you, so what do you think the role of lawyers are in bringing about the abolition of police and prisons? Because you got academics, you got organizers, right? You got politicians. Like, is there a specific role that lawyers can play?
Yeah, lawyers honestly can be the worst because we are conditioned throughout law school, and many of us before law school, because we thought that we were going to like become a lawyer, fight the good fight. Many of us are conditioned and around the system, around the criminal legal system. And so that's like the primary way that people think about lawyers' relationship to abolition. It's like, well, are you defending people? Are you suing jails? Are you a movement lawyer? Are you a human rights lawyer? All of that is really important and professional because it can help you decipher whether you're dismantling or whether you're antagonistic towards the carceral state or whether you're upholding it. So for example, whether you're a prosecutor or you're trying to get people out, right? So these are some of the things. I think what's more important for me than just where you fall professionally, it's where you fall in your political home. And so lawyers are conditioned to be like, oh man, I'm fighting a good fight. I'm not like a corporate lawyer. I'm like in these jails. I'm in these streets. I'm getting people out. But then there's no political education attached to their job, right? And so it's like, well, beyond your 9 to 9, because it's not a 9 to 5. Beyond your 9 to 9, like where are you in struggle with people? Like what are you risking in terms of like your life? What's your stake in this fight beyond like your job? And to me, that's so important because you're supposed to swear to uphold the Constitution. So the Constitution becomes the force by which you decide what's right or what's just or what's free. So I hear a lot of lawyers make arguments to get their clients out of jail or to stop an oppressive practice like this police. And it's in my bio. This is unconstitutional policing. But all of the policing that we're fighting against, a lot of that is constitutional. It's constitutional, and that's a problem, more so than unconstitutional policing. But then if you're a lawyer, you're stuck on making those arguments because that's what works in court, which is why we need lawyers to have political homes like Law for Black Lives, for example, or the National Lawyers Guild. So we can have an antagonistic relationship to the violent systems in society that's more than just our jobs. Yeah, so I think that's different. That's one. The other thing is that the lawyers who are not technically like criminal justice lawyers, but who work in corporations, what they do every day is maintain the tax structures and corporate structures that concentrate wealth for companies that lead to the devastation of our planet, of our entire universe. And so we don't think about them as like criminal justice lawyers, and we shouldn't. But we need to understand that those lawyers, like we are antagonistic to those lawyers. They're not neutral. They don't work at a firm. Like the companies that they represent do devastating violence that kills more people in this world than homicides, than manslaughter, than any of those crimes that we're afraid of, right? Yep. And so we have to understand that our criticism of the law also extends to lawyers who are protecting private property, who are protecting the massive movement of wealth across borders, right? We're also antagonistic to those people.
Yeah, I think about like, white collar crime and how much they literally destabilize economies. They literally steal millions and billions and hoard that like for themselves and their families. And yet, somebody who robs a home, a property crime, right, goes to jail for a very long time. And those people very seldom go to jail. And if they do, it's, not in any way proportional to the type of shit that they do. So I think that that's a really good point. Yeah, not at all. I mean, you can literally create a mortgage bubble and then steal a bunch of people's black people's homes and make money off of it. You stealing whole houses, like you're stealing houses. But if someone breaks into a house, they're going to go to jail or they're going to get shot by the police, right? So you're exactly right. The concept of like how we think of as property and trespass is different because it's out of the realm of interpersonal violence and it's corporate violence. And so it's calmer. It's like, oh, that's, this person didn't get their hands dirty, but nonetheless, the theft remains. Mm-hmm. And this is despite the fact that corporations are people, right? So why they not
Oh,
treated
right.
like the people?
True. I forgot.
Yeah, so just like switching gears just a little bit, you've written numerous public articles about politics, policing, and abolition, among other topics, for a number of outlets like the New York Times, The Guardian, Boston Review, Teen Vogue. I listed them all in your bio. So why is this genre of popular writing so important, and who is your target audience?
Yeah, so I've been a writer probably longer than I've been anything else, and I mean, my writing is okay now. It's gotten better, but the stuff I used to write early was just so passionate, but I didn't really have a strong political analysis. And so something would happen in the world, and I would just want to be able to tell people about it. I would want people to understand, like, this thing happened, it impacts you, it affects you, like, I hope you care. And so when I was, the first thing I published was about Sean Bell when he was killed in New York City. And I was just shocked that the police could just kill someone and get away with it. And this is like 2005 or 2006. And so when I think about the kind of writing I've done since then, I guess that's like 15 years now. I think it just comes from that place of people, me wanting to share people what's happening in the world. I think in the last maybe 5 to 6 years, it's been, I'm always trying to figure out a way how to accomplish conversations with different kinds of people. And so I'm in conversation with like lawyers, like through Law for Black Lives or through other like legal things I'm a part of. I'm in conversation with organizers in my political home. I also try to be in conversation with the public, because I think it's important to love in public. I think it's important to have, debate, to be pushed around your ideas. There's also an opportunity that something that you write may reach somebody in a way that something else wrote with the same ideas or arguments may necessarily not reach that audience. And so what I noticed a few years ago is when I would write about some of these issues that were happening in the world, especially around police violence, I would end up making these long 1,000, 2,000 word statuses like on Facebook. And I noticed that a lot of people who were my friends or who were my family or who I grew up with, like that's where I saw most of their engagement, not on like Twitter, not on like, not in journal articles, not on whatever. And so I was like, oh, wow, like it seems like this is a way to like have conversation with lots of different people. But if I publish them, if I take some of the energy and the way I've been drafting these statements and publish them, they'll have more shelf life, right? It's like, oh, we can now use this for political education instead of just putting 2,000 words on Facebook like every other week, right? And then you're like, oh man, didn't I write something about this? So that's like it switched from like just me venting and being angry to my political analysis getting better and then publishing them. So now when something comes up, it's like, oh, here's a link. I said something about this. And the last thing I'll say is that it also gives me an opportunity to show people, my audience is, I try to write for people who are fence sitters to like on board. And so people who are maybe abolition curious, anti-capitalism curious, not people who are always like, ready to put on a red star. Like I'm trying to like do that. So I think it's important to push those people over. Yeah. They want to push me over. So that's my audience. But I also am trying to introduce like movement work. So I always try to shout out organizers. I always try to shout out campaigns. I always try to say, look, like, I know this thing may seem like it's impossible. Here are 5 different groups who are doing it today. And so that's what I hope to do.
I love that. I love everything you just said because it's so different from me. And I think it's because I'm an academic, like, and a misanthrope. Because number one, I cannot imagine posting no long ass shit on Facebook and then having to engage people. Like I said what I said. Next, like that's really me. And then also, there was something else that you said that. And I'm also told my politics are for the already converted. Like I always say, I want like volunteers, not recruits. So it's so interesting, but I think that the work that you do is so crucial because it is important to sort of push people, right? Yeah. I think for me, it's kind of like once you get here, okay, I got something for you, right? Yeah. Because I just go, and I think having that sort of nuance that explaining what's happening with in mind that people may or may not be with the shits, right? I think that that's so important. And
we need all of it. We need all of it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So finally, go ahead.
Yeah, the only other thing I'll say about us needing all of it is that I know that I'm not the person to like fight with like naysayers. Like I know like that's my line, right? But I do think it's important that people do. I'm just not the one. There are lots of ones. So when, I was just watching this documentary on the Black Panthers about how Bobby Lee for like 2 weeks went to, the white part of Chicago and sat in front of a room with people who had Confederate flags and was just like, y'all white people are paying cops to beat y'all ass. Y'all taxpayers, y'all are doing that. Y'all paying them to beat y'all ass, and went for 2 weeks to convince them to start organizing together. I was just like, that's not me. I'm not like that person. Yeah. But we need people, because that's how we get like the young patriots. Like we need some people to say like, this is the realm that I want to work in, or I'm good at it, or I enjoy it. What happens often online is all of those things get collapsed, and it's just like, I'm not about to explain this to you, or you should know. Like that's like online. I don't think it's sometimes, especially like on Twitter or Facebook, it's not the best way to do that all the time. Sometimes it takes like being in organizations and like going to talk to people. But I know I enjoy most talking to people who are curious. And then sometimes the like debates that I have, like the fights that I have, are people usually I agree the most with. Like that's where that's the
nuance. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But I think what you just said is the importance of being in an organization, because I feel fine with my politics being for the already converted, because I know in my organization, for example, Black Alliance for Peace, there are the people who are going to go back and forth on Facebook or Twitter, or even in the community. There are the people who will go and talk to the whites. Talking to the white people, but they'll go and talk to the whites about how they can be good allies, or to convince whatever Confederate flag people can flip. There's all of those different talents, all of those different skills, and all of that different collaboration in an organization. So you don't have to be everything. Yeah.
Exactly. Online, people would try to make you everything. I was like, I wasn't even talking about that. Why are we arguing? I wasn't even there.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, so you have a forthcoming book, Becoming Abolitionists, Police, Protests, and the Pursuit of Freedom. So what was your impetus for writing the book, and what do you hope readers gain from it? And then also, what has been the best and worst part about writing it?
Oh, Jesus. Wow. These are, you just added that. So the impetus. So I guess like in 2016, every year I have a panic about whether I'm going to a PhD program. Every year. It's happened every year. Like it's always like, did I like go into a PhD program and like figure out these questions? And so in 2016, I had a conversation with one of my mentors, Robin Kelly, and I was just like, Robin, I think I'm going to go into a PhD program. He was like, okay, I'm so excited for you. Like, I think this is the right thing. And then a year later, we had a conversation about it. He was like, wait, you already know what you want to write? Just write this book. And I was just like, I cannot write a book. This is like the idea of writing a book right now. I need to go read some more. I need to go do And he was like, no, you should write this book.
Listen, I have a PhD and I feel the exact same way. Like and I wrote a dissertation, but I still writing this book. I'm like, there's no way I can do it. So we're here.
It's ridiculous. It's like, no, it's like, and yeah, it's just like so much pressure. He's like, no, I think that you have a very important story to tell, and I think that you should write it. And I had been collecting these notes around abolition for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years by that point. And so when everything popped off last year, it was just a whirlwind. Even my personal life, COVID had impacted my family. There was just a lot of transitions. And then this movement against police violence jumped off, and it was very different than 2014. In 2014, the primary call in the streets was Black Lives Matter, which I grew to become weary of, because it kind of didn't mean anything anymore. Saks and Fifth Avenue was saying Black Lives Matter. Everyone sort of saying Black Lives Matter, and they weren't giving no discounts. They was just saying it.
Black ties matter is what they meant.
Exactly. I was like, where's my coupon?
Right.
Anyway, but I was just like, what does this mean? I was just going to all these different places. I was learning about decolonization in South Africa. I was watching student movements in Brazil. I was learning from student organizers in Amsterdam. And I was just like, wow, these students are organizing and demanding so many things that are much more transformational, like give us the land back, free education, the end of contractual labor. And I was just like, well, what does Black Lives Matter mean, like in relationship to all of these demands that are happening abroad? So then last summer, there was just such a shift from Black Lives Matter to defund the police, which is, it felt so much more concrete, and it was, you could less easily co-opt something like that because it's clear, it's targeted, it's antagonistic, all of these things. And so I tried to figure out, how to write a story, to tell a book that encompasses like the origins of police, but through the understanding of police has been developed in response to our resistance, to our rebellion. Mm-hmm. That the reason why we have police and why they are funded to the degree that they are, because people have constantly resisted oppression. And what has happened in response, that you have to stop repression with, you have to stop rebellion with repression. And so I'll try to talk about how I learn about these things in a way that's, I guess, palatable is weird, but to people who are abolition curious, who is just like, how do you go from, when I was in high school, an organization called like Youth Crime Watch of America, to like wanting to abolish the carceral state, like showing anti-capitalism. So the first 4 chapters of the book are just show a little bit of my political development, which organizations pushed me, how I was meeting people that I didn't even realize the magnitude of their labor. Like when I was working in Kansas City, I was meeting Charlotte O'Neill, Peter O'Neill's wife, like at all of these events with one of my mentors. And it wasn't until I realized like what political prisoners were like a year later, mm-hmm. that I was like, oh my gosh, he's in exile still because of this bogus gun charge from the 70s. And so I tried to like give an account for how the state continues to use policing as a tool of like social control. And then, that's like student movements against police violence, histories of policing, all the way through chapters that then start talking about like, what about the murderers? What about sexual violence? Mm-hmm. I talk about disability justice. I talk about climate justice, and how, policing is just going to be used as a response to all of these forms of oppression, and how different organizers and different campaigns have been fighting to resist it. Best part and worst part. The worst part of writing this book is wanting to talk about everything. It's just the fear of missing like something that's so important to me and that's so important to this work. That's just so scary. So I had a whole section on Kalief Browder and Rikers, and just the history of Rikers and how it was named after this named from this Dutch family who were involved in the slave trade. And then the grandson of Rikers was part of the kidnapping club, like these, Democrats in New York City who would get a kickback from getting free Black people and sending them to the South. And so I had this whole thing about Kalief Browder, and then I was just like, I don't think I can keep this in the book. It's so important, but it's like, it deviates from like one of the central messages of the chapter. So it's making those kinds of calculations. And then the best part of writing this, just being able to tell the stories of like different organizers, literally from Palestine to Soweto to, the landless farmers in Brazil. I try to really show like how so many people have resisted police violence and what people are doing right now. But hopefully, like telling some of those stories and how people have come to those politics will at least help some people think that they can too.
I got you. Okay, so I have so many more questions on process, but I'm just going to leave it there because we've been talking for a while. When do you expect the book to drop? Do you have like a date?
It's on October 5th.
Oh, that's so exciting. Okay, we'll definitely have to have you back on around that time to talk about the book. Bring you out, parade you along the academic circuit to
my God.
Yes.
Yes, I would love to.
Thank you so much, Derica. I have learned so much from you, and I've been slowly catching up on your writing. So I look forward to your book dropping. I look forward to finishing going through like everything you've published. And thank you again for being here on the birthday episode.
I know. Well, thank you for inviting me for your birthday episode. I hope you celebrate. I learned so much from you. I'm always like, you're like one of the people I check for when I come online, because there's always something to like learn and be pushed. So thank you for all the work that you're doing, and now for like hyping up Black media.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
All right, y'all. We are back with one of our favorite segments, which is In These Tweets. So, Jared, you're up first.
So, well, obviously we have to start here, and I love the way this is working out, because obviously wanted to wish you a happy birthday, being this is the birthday show. But I just actually loved that I saw this tweet, because for the maybe one or two people that are not watching this on the Remix Morning Show, one of my own favorite segments is when Dr. Layla does her plant of the day. So I loved that she was saying here in this tweet that she's offering her plant of the day, not that I could pronounce that, Stromanth Trial Star, to wish you a happy birthday. So I thought that was pretty dope, and I will use that for my own expression of birthday wishes as well, for the moment at least. And so that's my first one there.
Well, thank you.
CBS.
And she picked that. She picked it because I was like, I want you to show the plant I like. And she's like, which one? I'm like, the colorful one on the floor. And so she was like, okay, I'll do that one. So yeah, that's my girl, Dr. Layla Brown.
Right on. Plant of the day. So
yes, plant of the day. All right. So there was something on your timeline that I wanted to talk about, which is, of course, it just says hashtag Gaza fights for freedom. You posted this full documentary directed by Abby Martin. And so obviously you're posting it based on what is happening currently and just the ongoing struggle in Palestine. But what's so good about this documentary?
Well, also that I had not seen the documentary, and so I noticed that they posted it. I think they're releasing it for free now on their channel. So I saw it, and I mean, obviously timed with what's happening now, and it just adds more context. It's very well shot, very well directed, as is most of the stuff that Abby is connected to with the Empire Files. I do like their work, but it's just. I don't know. It's hard to keep saying this, but it's just another stark reminder and painful reminder of really what is going on there. So you get some of the history behind what's happening for Palestinians, particularly in Gaza. And then you get, you see just very clearly what they're suffering and how they got there, and why what's happening in the news right now is still going on. And it's just, there's just really, it's just hard to watch this stuff and not conclude, very critically, to put it lightly, about what what Palestinians are suffering, what Israel is doing, and what those and by our own indirect tax support are supporting. It's just terrible.
Yes. So to say the least, very terrible. And anybody who does not see this as settler colonialism, apartheid, pan-European imposition is willfully ignorant, to say the least. So
check out this documentary if you haven't, and anyone watching, if they just need more details, or if anyone needs convincing or anything. I mean, it's just but it's painful. I mean, it's not easy to watch. Yeah. So
okay, all right. So on your timeline, Jab, you had this quote, imagine telling Black people not to listen to John Coltrane because he played a white man's instrument, end quote. And you said, Tom Porter on the question of whether or not Africans should engage in the science of life, or what many refer to as Marxism. And then, of course, we got somebody underneath that said, mic drop, my brother, which I agree. That is a mic drop. So that's such a good point, right? And so what inspired you to post this?
I mean, I just happened to be talking to my godfather that day, and this is something we come back to all the time. And I was literally trying to play Booker for him to come on your show, and we're still trying to work that out. But in talking about your work and his life, which is fascinating, and some of which we've captured at imixwhatilike.org. this is what he comes back to. So as an avid lover of Coltrane and jazz, or what, or Black classical music, as he puts it, you know, we came back to the same thing. So we were talking about a lot of your work, and in that context, he said again, I mean, you know, you wouldn't tell John Coltrane to put down a saxophone because some white man created it. And I mean, it just made a lot of perfect sense in terms of why we shouldn't ignore the African world, who has engaged Marxist ideas, and put it to amazing and very different uses. So I would think Marx to Black radical struggle is the same as Adolph Sax is to John Coltrane and jazz. They started with something pretty decent, useful, but clearly Black people have done something remarkably different with it, and we can't ignore it.
Period.
All right, so for me, Dr. CBS, I wanted to come back to let's see where this tweet here I noticed on your timeline, and I was struck by it because, as is the case often with what you talk about, I'm a bit ignorant of this one here. So you said you're very excited for this one, so much good for your own manuscript, but I'm not aware of this text here. No crystal stare, Black Life and the Messenger, 1917 to 1938. And my bifocals are struggling there a little bit. But could you talk a little bit about what this work and why it is going to be of such important use for your own?
Yes, this book right here, No Crystal Staircase, Black Life and the Messenger, 1917 to 1928. It's really a book about radicalism, Black radicalism in that moment. And it's about the Messenger magazine, right, that A. Philip Randolph and Chandler Owen founded. And to me, it's really important because what I'm looking at in this book is, number one, how they were targeted by the government, their Black radicalism. And I'm also interested, I'm not a huge fan of A. Philip Randolph, and so I'm interested in the distinction that he's making between socialism and communism, because very early on, he was hostile to it. And then he kind of, once the National Negro Congress was formed, he was like, cool, but then ultimately left the National Negro Congress because it was dominated by communists. And so I'm interested to see his own sort of rationale for why communism is not good for Black people. And also just looking at the ways like the government was surveilling Black publications and accusing them of subversion, the way that the Postmaster General was very integral to that surveillance and that targeting. And just looking at, so what was so bad or what was so radical about what was being said by Black folks? And indeed, in fact, it was very radical. They were anti-imperialist, anti-colonial, obviously, pro-Black liberation, critical of capitalism and all that stuff. And so I'm just interested to see how Theodore Cornweibel Jr., who wrote another book. The title escapes me now, but he wrote another book about, state surveillance of Black folks too. That is also very useful. But I think it's called Seeing Red. Anyway, so I'm just very excited to read that and I won't read it cover to cover. It's like these types of books are kind of like reference books, but I'm interested to see those themes in that text. So, yeah.
Right on. Fascinating. Can't wait to obviously can't wait for your book and to hear more about what you think about this one. Right on.
Listen, I can't wait to be done writing that thing because, as I've talked about many times and what I'm on, it's more than a notion to write a book. So,
right on. So look, there was another one I had from you.
Okay.
By the way, yeah, anyway, it's not meant to be taken lightly, but I couldn't help. But anyway, you had this tweet here from self-described Syrian girl, and it says, yes, African Americans are more privileged than Palestinians. Yes, Palestinian lives matter less than American ones, according to the media and the corporations who will not support them like they do BLM, that is Black Lives Matter, as opposed, of course, to Black Liberation Movement. Yes, we have a right to point it out. So take the knee. Palestinian lives matter. Woo! So all the solidarity we try to engage in on our channel here, Sister Dr. CBS, what is going on?
Yeah, so I sent you this. It was in my bookmarks. be bookmarking stuff. And so, yeah, I sent you this because it was just, there's so much abounds in this tweet. First of all, take the knee just seems very tacky here, not least because of Derek Chauvin's knee on George Floyd's neck. So that could be construed as what you mean by take the knee, right? Then there was Colin Kaepernick taking the knee, right? And his career being ruined. So I just thought that was, me being me and thinking about all the connotation and denotation and shit. I was just like, that was tacky. And secondly, we cannot do this oppression Olympics, okay? And she goes on to say basically any American is more privileged than a Palestinian. And I really wish people would read Black history. I really wish people would read current contemporary Black reality. And this is why I think that the colonial framework is so important when we realize that Black people are colonized people, that we live in a settler colonial society that, these comparisons just to me aren't useful. I think the more useful comparison is like, what is it like being a colonized person in two settler colonial societies? Like, what are the forms of solidarity that can be, that can be forged, right? And then she has a picture of Barack Obama. Like, what the fuck does that mean? Barack Obama hated Black people too. Barack Obama's a white supremacist. We know this. And so I guess she's saying, if a Black person can be the head of state in the United States, then that means that Black people are doing well, are doing better off than Palestinians. But that would just be like us going for and identifying Palestinians who might support the Israeli state. Surely they're out there, right? It doesn't mean that it's the majority or the plurality, but also like to what end, for what? I just think that shit is so silly to me. And it's like, why is it that African Americans who are constantly struggling for crumbs, right? Constantly struggling against so many forms of violence. Why is it that we so often become the point of comparison or the scapegoat for people to shore up their oppression or to compare whether or not they're better or worse off? Because it reminds me, for example, of like when all these Latinx actresses were mad at Black actresses for getting whatever few jobs they get. It's like, why are people constantly mad at African Americans? And why is that always a point of comparison? It's just particularly tacky. And it does remind me of the conversation we're having on you all were having on the morning show. I was in the chat about, and even on Tuesday about, solidarity and reciprocity. And this is, I think, these types of statements are antithetical to both.
It's also, we just talked about him. That's why, Tom Porter's also, one of his lines I often quote is, that's why we have to do what we do for the principle, not the people, because the people will disappoint you. So, we're in solidarity with Palestinians as a principle, even if silliness like this is coming from, obviously she's not self-described as Palestinian, but even if this is coming from the so-called similar community, and I would stand in solidarity. I'm in solidarity with the people of Syria, despite the madness coming from this lady, this one individual woman here. So, But just to your point, and all I would want to say to this is just woefully ignorant of Black history, of American history in general, to conclude what as she did there, and disrespects a lot of the Black radical tradition and the Black folks who continue to suffer for being in solidarity with Palestinians. I mean, that's, so it's just anyway, woefully ignorant and unfortunate.
So shut up, Syrian girl. How about that? All right, y'all. So for this segment of Left Disquisition, in which I talk about what's being talked about, discussed, analyzed, commented on, or critiqued on the platforms I learned from, I am joined by a fellow revolutionary Taurus, my comrade, Dedan Waciuri, who is from colonized Greenville, North Carolina. He is an organizer with Black Workers for Justice and sits on the coordinating committee of the Black Alliance for Peace. And he is also a founding member of Mapinduzi. And we're going to talk about the situation that's happening in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, among other topics. So welcome, Dedan.
Hey, glad to be here. Yeah,
thank you so much for being here. I cannot wait to get into this conversation. But before we delve into Elizabeth City, can you tell us more about your organization, Mapinduzi, and what the other organizations you're involved in and the work you're doing?
Yes, yeah. We founded Mapinduzi last year around the time of the George Floyd uprising in Greenville, North Carolina. And we just felt the need to have an organization in Greenville, North Carolina that spoke to really the issue at hand during that time of, the state repression and all the violence that we had seen all across the country. So Mapinduzi was just a way that we can introduce, a new level of consciousness in, Black working class community in Greenville, North Carolina, that really brings, the Black radical tradition to the forefront. And with that, I also belong to the Black Workers for Justice organization, and that has roots in Rocky Mount, North Carolina, and Raleigh, North Carolina, that really does a lot of work on organizing the working class around a lot of working class issues, and also sit on the coordinating committee of BAP. So, we mix a lot of that into Mapinduzi to really, touch on a variety of issues that need to be touched on when it comes to, the Black working class, and just really ways to engage in the struggle, and why it's important that we continue to engage in the struggle.
So is it a large organization? Is it a small organization? Like, what's the structure? Tell us more about it.
Well, Mapinduzi? No, Mapinduzi is very small right now. It's very local. We stick to North Carolina, and it's something that we try to create organically in that little realm that we're in Greenville, North Carolina. So it's not we have some members. We have probably about 15 members right now, which is doing a lot of work. We focus on a lot of mutual aid programs. We focus on propaganda, a lot of education. We feel as though that you have to raise a level of consciousness to get people engaged in the struggle. They need to know why it's important to engage. What is the reasons why we're constantly oppressed in this system? So we hold freedom schools on Sundays. We try to educate the people. We go over material that we get from BAP, material that we get from Black Works for Justice, or just theory that we might read from different radical authors and things like that. So those are mainly the programs that we try to focus on, is really people programs that meet people's material needs, but also giving them their education while we're doing that type of thing.
Got you. Thank you so much. Okay, so you are actually currently in Elizabeth City, North Carolina,
on the ground.
On the ground with local organizations protesting the police murder of Andrew Brown Jr., among other issues. So can you talk about what is the situation on the ground, and what are the community demands?
So the situation on the ground in Elizabeth City is a very small type of city in North Carolina. It has about 18,000, I think, and the majority of it is Black. And so with that, it's one of those good old boy networks in Elizabeth City that still continues that repressive nature that, goes on in the South. So Andrew Brown was murdered by the sheriff's deputy. I think they call it Pascatank sheriff's deputy. There were 7 officers involved. I'm sorry. There were 7 officers involved, and 3 of them that fired the shot. He was shot. The fatal shot hit him in the back of the head. They all were shooting high-powered rifles that shoot 223 bullets. And those are big bullets. So, with that, the community, the small community, all connected. There's a real connection here in Elizabeth City with it being so small. So a lot of the people know each other or have, close, ties with each other. So the death of Andrew Brown was something that really shook a lot of people here in Elizabeth City. And what happened with that, a lot of people took to the ground. But the response to that was Elizabeth City sending out law enforcement agencies from like 23 surrounding counties. So with that, the repression was very high. Law enforcement was all over the city. They shut down a local HBCU to house law enforcement. They shut down Elizabeth City University, which is HBCU, and they closed down half of the dorms, removed the students to house law enforcement that was coming in from places like Virginia, Greenville, where I'm from, Rocky Mount, and places like that. So the community seen that, and there was a lot of pushback. Local students pushed back and got a petition rolling around where they removed, that was a success for them, where they had the officers removed from Elizabeth City University. But a lot of the tension on the ground is still, just the way that law enforcement has been so prevalent in this city. So the demands on the ground really is to remove outside law enforcement agencies. That's what a lot of the community wants. They don't want law enforcement agencies that's coming from surrounding counties that don't have any kind of connections in this city, to be in this city. Another demand that they want is the removal of the DA from the case, because the DA has close connections with law enforcement. His office is in the same building with the sheriff's deputy here in Elizabeth City. So it's the good old boy network. So they have close connections. So that's another demand that they want. They want the DA to be removed from the case and bring in another DA. And another demand that they have is that the officers involved, be fired. 7 of them was involved, and 4 of them are back on the streets.
Wow.
Yeah, already, yeah. 4 of them back on the streets, and the other 3 are still on leave.
Okay.
The shots are on leave, but the other 4 are back on the force.
So let me ask you this. You talked about the high power rifles and the big weapons. Is this linked to the 1033 program in any way, as far as you can tell?
I would say so. There's also a situation here in Elizabeth City where there's a Blackwater camp right down the road.
Wow.
Yes. And there is a lot of people from Elizabeth City feel though that their police officers and their sheriff department gets trained by these mercenaries.
Yeah, so Blackwater is the small, like private military firm that did a lot of work in Iraq. And in fact, I think that they changed their name recently, right?
Yeah,
to conceal the fact that they were involved in all that.
Right. They change their name every time it happened. Yeah.
Wow. Oh, that's very interesting. Okay, so there was another interesting development. Roland Martin decided to roll up. And it was caught on tape that you and some of the local organizers exchanged some words with him. So what happened and why was it all important for y'all to like get him together, basically?
Well, yeah, that was a very emotional day. That was the day that the autopsy report got released to the public.
Okay.
And a lot of the people got to hear how violent, this man was assassinated. They got to hear how he was drug out of his car and placed face down on the ground while they left him there for hours and then went in his house to continue to search his house. So that caused a lot of anger, and a lot of emotions that day. And Roland was there, and a woman approached Roland and just, calling him a clout chaser and saying, for the cameras and, Roland, him being this, I don't know, he gave off this, intellectual, I'm better than everybody kind of vibe, and really started to kind of mock the woman, saying like, you don't follow what I do. I'm black business. I am the camera. This is I go around. This is what I do type of thing. So, the community really got, hostile with Roland. And so I came into the picture because I kind of questioned and said, at the end of the day, you owning the black business doesn't really mean anything because you don't own the capital at the end of the day. And you're not doing anything for the people in Elizabeth City. So, or the people where you are stationed at, period. Whatever economic development that Roland Martin has is not beneficial for the masses of black working class people. And that was my point of trying to get across, but it just turned into this whole, this whole thing that got caught on video. But I feel like it was important, though. I do feel like it was important for the community to let Roland Martin know that, just you being, a black person that's seen on TV is not the liberating factor that we need. Because what came up from some black youth was that Baltimore was a situation that got amplified all across the world. And that wasn't because of Roland Martin and black media. That was because of black youth taking to the streets and resisting against the state and other places like that in Philadelphia. So there's many examples that was given that we don't need people like Roland Martin to come to Elizabeth City, North Carolina, to make this situation something that's seen all across the world. I think that, we have the ability and the people in Elizabeth City have the ability to do that for themselves. So I think that was just the main, thing that was trying to get across to Roland Martin.
So did he leave after that? Did he stay? Like, what was the outcome of the conversation?
Roland Martin left. He had some security with him. He had his own security. He told him he got to watch out for us, and he left. Yeah, he left with him and Benjamin Crump. Yeah,
he was with Benjamin Crump. Now that is a certified ambulance. He's a hearse chaser, not an ambulance chaser. He chased hearse. He never met a dead black body he didn't like.
We
is
said
so
something to
wild.
him too. Yeah, the community said something to him too. It's funny because, you know, the people in Elizabeth City being so small and so rural, I think, you know, these people really don't have the same type of effect that they may have in larger cities where people know them and kind of follow them, their track record. So no, they wasn't really impressed with Roland Martin or Benjamin Crump.
So what was said to Crump? Same thing. Like, what is he doing here?
The new Black Panther Party from Virginia in the DC area had came, and they was calling him ambulance chasing Negroes, and they said his suit was paid in the blood of our people, and the people agreed with it. You know, they was following that. So, you know, I think, you know, they got a message of, you know, you don't mean nothing here, in a sense. Yeah.
So is there a role for like the Black petty bourgeoisie, the entertainment class and all this, or are they just enemies, period?
Well, I mean, that's hard because, I mean, you know, I will say that a lot of attention has been placed on Elizabeth City. You know, you got some, you know, places that like MSNBC, CNN, and things like that, and they have a tendency to follow, you know, those type of, you know, people like Roland Martin, and, you know, Benjamin Crump, a pastor named man with the Poor People's Campaign, Reverend Barber. You know what I mean? And the media has they follow that. So, you know, they do have a place, I do think, when it comes to shedding some kind of insight on what's going on. But I think it's important that the people always know that they are the ones that dictate the momentum of what's being done and how it should be done on the ground. And I think that's one of the problems. The people that's coming in, like the Roland Martin, the Benjamin Crump, and the Barbers and things like that, are taking the attention away from the local people, and their voices are being suppressed. And that's one of the issues that is that's one of the issues here.
Yeah, it seems to me like, you know, I wrote on Twitter one time, like, you know, I feel like this class of people can shut the fuck up as praxis. It's like, okay, bring whatever resources, bring the attention, but then you can step back. And if you're connected with local organizations, you can bring the attention and then take a step back and let the people who are actually affected by this violence and brutality, the people who are actually understanding of what the material conditions are, you can hold space or open space for them to tell their own stories. They don't need it to be interpreted through third parties.
Right. And I mean, and that's the way it should be done. And that's the way it should be done. And it could have been done this way in Elizabeth City with being so small. They have the opportunity to really put a lot of the local, you know, organizers to the forefront, but they haven't. You had a preacher down here named Drumright that was charging people $50 a bus ticket to bus people all over from Greensboro, Charlotte, and Raleigh to come to Elizabeth City. That caused it caused a mess, really, because you had an influx of people from all over coming in for a parade, really, where you had, you know, Al Sharpton up there dancing, white people up there dancing, but in a lot of the local people didn't even show up because they felt like it wasn't their event. So, like you said, you know what I mean? Their duty should be to use them resources to really, you know, prop up the local leaders. But that's something they continue to do, but, you know, not to do. But you know.
That reminds me of the story Crystal Strong told about Philadelphia, how Until Freedom was trying to organize these bus tours after Walter Wallace Jr. was murdered. They tried to organize, drop in and organize these bus tours, and the community was not having it. They ran them up out of there because it's like, what is y'all doing? Like, this has nothing to do with our actual situation, and it has no benefit for us in terms of, you know, improving our conditions, amplifying our reality. So what are you doing here?
Right. And that's and that was the same sentiment from the people from EC. You know, it was like, what are you doing here? You know, we don't, you know, after the cameras and everything is gone, after, you know, all the Black celebrity class is gone, the same material conditions are going to be in, you know, Elizabeth City. So what are you going to do to, really, you know, amplify those issues? Because that's one of the things that was brought up to Roland Martin. Why are you not talking about the overwhelming police presence here in Elizabeth City? You know, why are you talking about the Blackwater camp down the road here in Elizabeth City? You know, those are the things that he's not willing to discuss, because we know that his platform can't discuss those things because it's only there to represent the status quo, you know. And so,
yeah, useless niggerati. um, so you mentioned repression a while ago. So I want to talk a little bit about like what you're facing. So there are currently charges pending against you in Greenville, North Carolina, because of your activism and organizing last summer. And so, like, what are you charged with? And how are these charges being used as an intimidation tactic, including the, pushing your court dates back? And then what can we do to support you?
Right. So yeah, my charges, so we was invited to a rally, Mapinduzi, in Greenville after the protest, after the death of George Floyd. When and after that, some minimal things had happened, like a police car had got smashed in, and some windows had got smashed in, and I think that was about it. And after that, the chairman of a local organization named the Coalition Against Racism I organized with had got a call from somebody that said that the police had called them and said they was looking for me over the damage because they had got word or something that I was the one telling people to do this and do that. So they had charged me with felony inciting a riot and felony damage to property. And that's currently what I'm charged with. And my court date is coming up on the 31st of this month. But it's just a tactic because they have no evidence. They have nothing. There's nothing that they can show that I was appointing people to do anything. So it's just another tactic to really just keep, Black activists off the streets or try to, intimidate us to the point we don't want to go out there and organize anymore or try to get the people, to really, focus on the things that need to be focused on. So that's just another scare tactic of Greenville Police Department to really just, slow Mapinduzi down to keep us from doing the work. But no, it ain't work. We still out there thugging. So
period. You in Elizabeth City right now. So.
Right. Oh yeah, no, it don't stop. It don't stop. So that's it's something that we fighting and we continue to fight. But I do really feel like, with the support of everybody that I've been getting, the support from BAP, the support from Black Works for Justice, and so many other good comrades all from everywhere, that it's not gonna stick. I got a call from my lawyer actually not too long ago, and he was saying that how the city was just upset that they have all this attention placed on them from all over. We had an event. We went to the courthouse and we presented, I want to say, over 5,000 signatures.
Wow.
To the DA. And so, it's a lot. They know that there's a lot of attention placed on this, and that's something that I don't think that they want. So we really feel good about the situation and feel like the charge will be dropped soon. Hopefully, on the 31st of this month, I get that phone call.
Period. Yeah. So keep eyes on this case. Keep pressure on it. We're here to check these people because we also want the charges to be dropped because you're doing such important work. Mapinduzi is doing such important work. And as we were speaking about earlier on the show, we don't need more political prisoners in the making. That's what's happening to Ant Smith in Philadelphia. And we certainly do not want that happening with you. So hopefully, drop the charges.
Oh yeah, drop the charges on all levels. Yeah.
Period. Drop the charges, free them all that. Anything else you want to share, and where can people find you? Where can people learn more about your work?
And I ain't good with that stuff. I'm on Facebook, Daydown Waciuri. I'm on Twitter. I just got on Twitter. I'm Waciuri_Daydown. And those are the two main places that I'm on. And I'm in the streets. If you're in North Carolina, you definitely catch me in the streets.
In the streets. All right. We will look you up in the streets. So thank you so much for being here, comrade. I'm glad that you shed some light on what's happening on the ground in Elizabeth City, and, the organizations you're involved with. And I hope to have you back as you continue to struggle in the streets.
I would definitely thank y'all for this opportunity. It was definitely exciting. Yeah. Hey, I've been waiting for my opportunity to be on the Last Throat Intellectual.
Hey, well, here you are, and you're welcome back anytime. Let me know.
I appreciate you, comrade.
Right. Thank you. Appreciate you. All right, y'all. So for this birthday edition of What I'm On, it has nothing to do with birthdays, but what I've been thinking about recently as I've been writing, or, thinking about writing, because the other thing about birthday week is that I do work if I feel like it. If I don't feel like it, then it'll be there when I get back on the case. But part of what I've been thinking about is writing pace and the different paces that I employ or that are required for writing different parts of the book. So for example, when I'm just narrating a particular historical context, like that's more fast. I'm flowing. Generally speaking, I'm listening to chill hop. Okay, something with a little more thump to it. And I'm just typing away. And so that's a little bit more sort of like a stroll. When I'm doing theory, I can't have no noise, or I got to have classical music turned down real low. It's very slow because I feel like the theory that I do is very intricate. I agonize over every word. Like, am I using expropriation? Am I using dispossession? If I'm talking about, coercion versus conscription, the precise wording feels very, very important. And so there's a lot of pauses. I'm thinking a lot. Sometimes I'm getting up and literally pacing back and forth, trying to figure things out. I often I'll go outside and like take a walk around the block and literally talk to myself as I'm trying to figure out this wording. But it's just such a different kind of pace of writing. And so whereas I might write, 5 pages or something, or, of context or background or descriptive prose, it may be, 2-3 hours, whatever. I might just have a paragraph of trying to theorize the obfuscated abode, for example. And because it's such a different, I don't know what other word to use than pace. It's a different aspect of my mind that's working. And it just takes more time, right? And again, it's interesting, like the different environments. Like I can't have too much noise. I cannot have distraction. Like I need to get up more often, constantly. And so it's harder to get into a flow state with theory because there's more. I need to do more. I need to get up more. Whereas when I'm writing in other ways, I'm sitting there flowing, and that's a flow state is when you're typing, you're thinking, you're banging it out, and you look up. And 45 minutes to an hour have passed and you're like, oh, shoot, and so I'm just, that's something that I'm thinking about. And it's worth considering for your own writing process. Like, what are your different paces, or what are your different gears for when you're writing different aspects of your chapter or your article or your section or whatever. And then also thinking about allotting time around that. So, and giving yourself grace. So, you getting a paragraph of theory done in 3-4 hours is actually goals, and so you don't get too hard on yourself. Whereas, yesterday you got 4 or 5 pages done and you're like, what happened? Well, you're writing differently. You're you're in a different gear, right? You're in 3rd gear versus 1st gear. I clearly don't know shit about cars. I don't know what the gears are, but you get what I'm saying. And so all of these things that I share are really just about knowing yourself better, knowing your writing style better, and having more insight into the different ways that you write, what's required when you're writing different types of words, for lack of a better word. And so, so that's what I'm on for this week: pace and gears. So, Jared, do you have anything that you want to add?
I do. First, I wanted to say shout out to Jodi Dean and all the good people in North Carolina. And the first thing I was thinking of was, their neighbors. I think it's 258 miles. It looks like
wow.
About southwest. I did a quick look from Monroe to Elizabeth City. And just a little, just a shout out to them
Robert F. and Mabel Williams.
And to the Freedom Archives who put this together, because this joint is a banger. Anyway, but anyway, Negroes with Guns. It's anyway. But just in general, another great show. I mean, the interviews, the discussions, fantastic. And of course, I really appreciate these discussions of your writing process. So, I mean,
yeah.
Anyway, number 15, and well done, and happy birthday. Yeah.
Thank you. Just quickly, I'm just thinking, I wonder if the shift from Negroes with Guns to Niggas with Attitudes is akin to the shift from Black Liberation Movement to Black Lives Matter. A conundrum, a head scratcher.
I just want to let that marinate in my mind grapes for a little while, but I think you're onto something for sure.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right, y'all. That is our show. The birthday episode for this Friday evening. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with me. I am Dr. CBS. That's Stop Jab, and we are signing off.